Have you ever wondered if a house could remember every person who ever walked through its doors? What if one forgotten mansion in the United States wasn't simply abandoned, but was waiting for the next curious visitor? Across America, there are thousands of abandoned homes, each carrying forgotten memories, hidden tragedies, and unsettling legends. Most are simply old buildings slowly collapsing with time. But a handful have become something else. Places where police officers refused to enter alone. Places where experienced investigators suddenly abandoned their research. Places where witnesses told stories so similar that authorities could never fully explain them. Tonight's story is based on documented historical events, eyewitness accounts, local legends, newspaper archives, and unexplained incidents surrounding one of America's most mysterious abandoned houses. Whether everything that happened can be explained, or whether something darker still remains inside, is a question that continues to haunt everyone who has studied its history. If you think ghosts only exist in horror movies, you may want to keep watching. Because after hearing this story, you might never look at an abandoned house the same way again. Deep within the dense forests of northern Pennsylvania, hidden several miles away from the nearest paved road, stands an enormous Victorian mansion known locally as Ashwood House. Official maps identify the property only by an old parcel number. Residents of nearby towns rarely mention its name. Older generations simply call it the house. Not because there aren't other houses nearby, but because everyone knows exactly which one they're talking about. Its towering brick walls remain surprisingly intact despite standing abandoned for over 100 years. Its shattered windows stare into the forest like empty eyes. Its rusted iron gates remain locked, although no one officially owns the land today. Nature has almost reclaimed the property, yet every year, people still find their way there. Some are urban explorers, others are paranormal investigators, some are simply curious teenagers looking for excitement. Not everyone leaves with the same story. According to county archives, the mansion was constructed in 1873 by wealthy industrialist Jonathan Ashwood. Ashwood built his fortune supplying railroad companies with timber during America's industrial expansion. At the height of his success, he spared no expense. The mansion contained over 40 rooms. Imported Italian marble covered the grand staircase. Crystal chandeliers illuminated every hallway. Hand-carved oak doors lined each corridor. Visitors reported describing the estate as one of the most beautiful private homes in the entire state. Jonathan Ashwood lived with his wife Eleanor and their 3 children. Photographs from the period show a smiling family standing proudly on the front steps. Nothing about those images suggested the nightmare that would soon unfold. The first strange event occurred only 2 years after construction. Housemaids began resigning without explanation. Most refused to collect their final wages. One servant claimed she heard children laughing every night despite all the children being upstairs. Another insisted footsteps followed her through empty hallways. One gardener told neighbors he repeatedly saw a woman dressed entirely in white standing on the 3rd floor balcony. Whenever anyone looked directly at her, she disappeared. At first, these stories were dismissed as superstition. Victorian homes were enormous. Old wooden structures naturally creaked. Wind echoed through chimneys. Animals moved inside walls. Everything had a reasonable explanation. Until the deaths began. County death records show that in the winter of 1878, Jonathan's youngest daughter, Emily, died suddenly after developing a mysterious illness. Doctors could never determine the exact cause. Within 6 months, Eleanor Ashwood also passed away under equally mysterious circumstances. Neighbors described Jonathan as completely broken. He withdrew from society. The mansion's windows remained permanently covered. Visitors were turned away. Deliveries stopped arriving. Only one servant remained, an elderly caretaker named Samuel Briggs. Years later, Samuel reportedly told local reporters that the house itself had changed after Eleanor's death. According to him, the temperature inside certain rooms became unnaturally cold, regardless of the season. Doors locked themselves. Portraits occasionally appeared crooked, despite being carefully straightened moments earlier. Most disturbingly, Samuel claimed he sometimes heard conversations happening inside empty rooms. Not whispers, full conversations. Voices discussing people who no longer lived there. One autumn evening in 1882, Jonathan Ashwood vanished. His horse was found wandering several miles away. His carriage remained untouched inside the stable. No signs of robbery existed. No body was ever discovered. Authorities searched nearby forests for nearly 2 weeks. Nothing. With no surviving family members willing to claim the property, Ashwood House slowly fell into abandonment. For decades, it sat empty, yet stories surrounding the mansion only became stranger. During the early 1900s, railroad workers occasionally used the property as temporary shelter during severe storms. Several journal entries from that period mention hearing piano music echoing through the empty mansion after midnight. Investigators later confirmed no piano remained inside the house. Others reported seeing lights moving room to room, despite the building having no electricity. One worker allegedly fled barefoot into the forest after claiming someone whispered his full name directly behind him. No one else heard the voice. In 1924, local sheriff Thomas Keller organized an overnight inspection after repeated reports of trespassers. According to surviving newspaper articles, deputies entered shortly before sunset. Only 4 officers went inside. All 4 exited before midnight. One deputy reportedly resigned less than a week later. The official report simply described unexplained disturbances making further investigation unnecessary. No additional details were included. That single sentence fueled decades of speculation. What disturbed trained law enforcement enough to abandon the investigation? Nobody knows. As America entered the Great Depression, abandoned buildings became common shelters for travelers. Ashwood House attracted dozens. Most stayed only one night. Several described identical experiences despite never meeting one another. They reported hearing footsteps upstairs, slow, measured, always beginning around 2 in the morning. The footsteps never descended the staircase. They simply crossed the hallway, stopped directly above whoever occupied the first floor, and remained perfectly still until sunrise. In modern times, advances in technology have brought a new generation of investigators to Ashwood House. Thermal cameras, motion sensors, digital recorders, drone photography. Many expected science to finally explain the legends.
Instead, the mystery only deepened. Multiple investigators independently reported electronic equipment shutting down without warning. Fresh batteries drained within minutes. Digital recordings sometimes captured faint voices that no one heard during filming. Most recordings remained too distorted for definitive analysis. Skeptics argue audio pareidolia explains everything. Believers disagree. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Ashwood House isn't any single ghost story. It's the remarkable consistency. People from different decades, different backgrounds, different belief systems often describe remarkably similar experiences. Footsteps upstairs, cold rooms, a woman watching from upper windows, someone speaking their name. Whether these similarities result from psychological suggestion, environmental conditions, or something science still cannot explain, remains unknown. Architectural historians who have inspected the mansion discovered another fascinating detail. Hidden behind one library wall lies a narrow, concealed staircase leading to a tiny observation room overlooking the grand entrance hall. No one knows why it was built. Victorian mansions occasionally contained secret passages, but this one appears unusually isolated. The room contains no furniture, only a single chair permanently facing the front door, as though someone once spent countless hours silently watching everyone who entered. During restoration surveys conducted decades ago, workers found dozens of children's handprints pressed into old wallpaper beneath several layers of paint. Far more handprints than Jonathan Ashwood's family alone could account for. No historical records explain their origin. Were they left by neighborhood children, visiting relatives, workers, or something else entirely? No evidence provides a clear answer. Today, Ashwood House remains abandoned. Time continues wearing away its walls. Rain falls through broken ceilings. Trees push against cracked foundations. Birds nest where chandeliers once hung. Yet despite decades of decay, the house refuses to disappear. Every Halloween, local authorities receive reports of trespassers entering the property. Every few years, another documentary crew attempts to solve its mystery. Some leave disappointed. Others leave convinced they experienced something impossible. There are no verified photographs of ghosts, no scientific proof that supernatural forces inhabit the mansion. But there is something undeniably fascinating about places where history, tragedy, psychology, folklore, and human imagination intersect. Ashwood House reminds us that abandoned buildings preserve more than bricks and timber. They preserve stories, some true, some exaggerated, some impossible to verify. And perhaps that uncertainty is what makes places like this so unforgettable. Because fear doesn't always come from what we know. Sometimes it comes from what we can never fully explain. So if you ever find yourself driving through an isolated American back road and you notice an old Victorian mansion standing silently among the trees, with broken windows reflecting the fading sunlight, you may be tempted to stop, to take one photograph, to satisfy your curiosity. After all, it's only an abandoned house. At least, that's what everyone tells themselves before they walk through the front door. And according to local legend, the house never forgets the people who enter, even after they leave, or perhaps especially after they leave. There were no broken railings, no signs of collapse. Nothing had fallen into the river. The 5 miners were never found. Authorities assumed they somehow abandoned the wagon. Yet no footprints were discovered despite fresh snowfall covering the bridge. The case quickly became one of the region's greatest mysteries. People whispered that the bridge had taken them. Sheriffs dismissed the rumors. Life continued until the disappearances happened again. Throughout the 1920s, travelers occasionally reported strange encounters while crossing Devil's Crossing after dark. Most described hearing footsteps behind them, despite walking alone. Others claimed someone repeatedly called their name from beneath the bridge. Whenever they looked over the railing, the river appeared completely calm. Too calm, as though the flowing water had suddenly stopped moving. One truck driver later testified that he crossed the bridge during heavy rain in 1931. Halfway across, he noticed dozens of people standing along both sides of the bridge, perfectly still, all facing him. Their clothing appeared decades out of date. Long coats, old dresses, wide-brimmed hats. He slowed down, blinking through the rain. The figures vanished instantly. Police found no evidence anyone had been there. In 1938, engineers conducted a structural inspection. Their report contained an unusual note. Workers repeatedly complained about hearing metallic footsteps above them while inspecting the bridge's underside. The sounds continued for nearly 2 hours. No one was found on the bridge. Engineers blamed expanding steel caused by temperature changes, yet the noises reportedly matched the rhythm of human footsteps, not random creaks. Step, 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 pause, then silence. During World War II, military transport occasionally used the isolated route. One Army convoy reported losing radio contact with a supply truck while crossing Devil's Crossing. Minutes later, the truck was found parked neatly in the middle of the bridge. Engine still running, lights still on, driver missing. His rifle remained inside. His wallet sat on the dashboard. There were no signs of violence, no footprints, no blood. Military investigators quietly closed the case. The files remained classified for years. As decades passed, the bridge slowly fell out of use. A newer highway bypassed the old mountain road. Traffic disappeared. So did maintenance. Rust spread across every beam. Weeds pushed through cracked pavement. By the late 1970s, the bridge officially closed. Yet local police still responded to calls from curious explorers. Most reports sounded remarkably similar. People heard voices, saw figures, lost track of time, or became convinced someone was following them. In 1986, documentary filmmaker Daniel Harper decided to spend one night filming Devil's Crossing. His crew installed cameras at both ends of the bridge. Infrared equipment monitored every entrance. No one entered, no one exited. Yet around 2:17 a.m., every microphone simultaneously recorded the unmistakable sound of dozens of footsteps crossing the bridge. The cameras captured nothing. Reviewing the footage later, technicians confirmed the audio came from multiple directions, as if an invisible crowd had crossed directly between the cameras. The recording remains one of the bridge's most discussed mysteries. Skeptics argue unusual echoes created the sounds. Supporters insist otherwise. 1 year later, local teenagers illegally entered the bridge, hoping to recreate the documentary. 3 friends walked together toward the center. Only 2 remembered reaching the opposite side. The third insisted nearly 45 minutes had disappeared from his memory. His watch wrist had stopped exactly at 2:17 a.m., the same time recorded in Harper's documentary. No medical explanation accounted for the lost time. Psychologists suggested stress and expectation influenced memory. His friends disagreed. They believed something had happened on that bridge, something none of them could fully remember. Modern paranormal investigators continue visiting Devil's Crossing despite official warnings. Thermal imaging frequently detects sudden cold zones. Compasses occasionally spin without obvious magnetic interference. Drone operators have reported losing GPS signals directly above the bridge before regaining control seconds later. Engineers point to surrounding mineral deposits as a possible explanation. Others remain unconvinced. Perhaps the strangest account came from retired Sheriff Michael Collins. Unlike ghost hunters, Collins spent 40 years investigating real crimes. He openly dismissed supernatural claims, until one night changed his mind. Responding to reports of trespassers, Collins parked near the bridge shortly after midnight. His patrol vehicle dashboard camera remained active. The footage showed Collins stepping onto the bridge with a flashlight. Approximately 6 minutes later, he suddenly began running back toward his vehicle, breathing heavily, clearly terrified. When questioned later, Collins refused to explain what frightened him. He retired less than 3 months afterwards. Years later, during a local interview, he finally offered one sentence: "I didn't see a ghost. I saw people, but they weren't alive." He never elaborated further. Today, Devil's Crossing continues attracting explorers from across America. Warning signs surround the area. Local authorities discourage nighttime visits, not because they officially believe the legends, but because the aging structure has become dangerously unstable. Whether the stories originate from real supernatural events, psychological suggestion, natural environmental effects, or generations of folklore blending with historical tragedy, no one can say with certainty. Yet one fact remains undeniable. For more than 100 years, people who have never met each other, from completely different generations, continued describing the same sounds, the same figures, the same overwhelming feeling that something is watching from the darkness beneath the bridge. Perhaps fear has a way of repeating itself. Or perhaps some places simply refuse to let history fade away. So the next time you're driving through a lonely stretch of road late at night, and your GPS suddenly reroutes you onto an old forgotten bridge, don't stop. Don't get out. And if you happen to notice someone standing alone in the middle of the road, whatever you do, don't let them convince you to cross. Because according to the oldest legend surrounding Devil's Crossing, the bridge never chooses its victims. It simply waits for someone willing to take